So, what exactly is the role of stylistic composition in learning to compose, whether that's kind of at a university level or before? This is something I've been thinking about. Well, I've been thinking about it for years, but it's something I'm sort of focusing on more and more. Um, Welcome to my studio. You can see that yeah, things are still getting set up. I'm still in the new space here, but yeah, getting there gradually. Um, so this thing of stylistic composition, yeah. So when I say that, I'm referring to the types of things that you would get in a stylistic composition module, which probably is going to look at least a little bit at the music of Bach, um, and maybe some earlier things as well. But kind of when I think of it, I suppose my mind turns to things like Bach chorales, counterpoint, fugue, things like that, and then I suppose things like sonata. At university, I was asked to, in one of the modules, to compose a piano sonata, which had, the first movement in sonata form, and then a slow movement, and then a minuet and trio, and then I think we did a theme and variations as well. So kind of looking at those kind of classical things, which was good and it was helpful. But my memory is more of the chorales that I did at school. Those were really formative. And then we did fugue writing at university level as well. So I think the sort of question is, well, what is the role of that work exactly in learning to compose? And I think the big question that is on my mind is that, well, if we are composing in a modern idiom, kind of post John Cage type of world, there is an argument to be made that says that do we really need to be training people in those things? I mean, I benefited from those things greatly, and I benefit from them every day, the fact that I did chorales and all that stuff. But there is this argument that says, well, okay, but if you want to be a sound artist and do loudspeaker installations in museums and things, that is to do with kind of musique concrète and all that stuff, should we just be doing things with Logic and the computer program Logic, and sort of learning recording and all these other things, and timbre and advanced rhythms and stuff like that? Yeah, I mean, sure, but I think I'm sort of not. I'm trying to present this as a sort of multifaceted argument where there's different options, really. But I suppose I tend to think that learning to write Bach chorales, for example, for me gave me the ability to sort of really learn my keys. Because if you have to do on an A flat, you have to do it in A flat, and so you have to use all the different chords from that key and so on, and also obviously it teaches you the sort of inversions of the chords, things like that. And it kind of, I think what happens really is that it, in a clever way, it sort of teaches you fundamental things kind of all at once. So you end up kind of learning your keys, and you learn about melody writing and phrasing, because you learn about cadence, right? So you learn about how a melody can kind of be periodically phrased and sort of stop at a certain point, and how you get to that stopping point. So you learn about melody writing, you learn about bass line writing, because you learn how to kind of harmonize the melody with one note, so which you do in the sort of pre-Bach stuff as well. So you kind of learn about melody, you learn about how to write a melodic bass line, and then you learn how to deal with the inner voices. I think that was the crux for me, was that as a guitar player, I learned chords, and I would strum the chords and I would sing the tune or whatever. And working in this sort of way where you have a melody and a bass line, and then you have to fill in two inner voices and outline the harmony without causing parallel fifths and all these things, yeah, it just sort of it taught me, I should say, just how to write music that kind of moves smoothly, and also another thing that you learn then is modulation, and how to modulate in a way that is smooth. Now, of course, when I started doing film music, I was kind of, in some ways, holding on to this idea of modulating smoothly, and then I realized, no, sometimes you have to have a direct modulation that sort of is very surprising, because the film is surprising, and so the music has to be surprising. And you know, so you do a lot of things like modulating by a third, for example, in a much more direct way. And also when I started doing more kind of arranging and doing arranging, I remember doing a class at Berkeley that was to do with arranging brass, like horns, in a jazz context. I found myself sort of doing bar chorale type things that sometimes were appropriate and sometimes weren't quite appropriate, and I had to adapt what I was doing in order to kind of be in this different idiom. But I do think that those fundamental ideas helped me when I was then composing in this different idiom, because I already knew how to voice chords and all that type of thing. Yeah, so I think it just turns out that doing things like chorales gives you these fundamental things in a way that you kind of learn them all at once. And I actually found it really fun. There's something about, for me, there was something about sitting with a piece of paper and a pencil in a quiet room and working out these parts. In fact, we had an exam where we had 3 hours and we were given a melody. I think it was 32 bars, I think. And we had 3 hours and no piano, and we had to sit in complete silence and write the bass line and write the middle parts. And I know maybe I'm strange, but I found that really, really thrilling, actually. I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I really got a lot out of it. So yeah, so you won't necessarily learn really advanced modern rhythms, I think, is one thing that you perhaps don't learn from doing chorales. You know, you won't learn, yeah, really advanced modern rhythms, or indeed advanced modern harmony, but it gives you this sort of a grounding in tonal music. And after all, so much of the music that is made still today, if we're talking about popular music, is tonal. And so it sort of makes sense, I think, in that respect. But I acknowledge that there are lots of ways to do things. And I mean, you could do stylistic composition where you focus on a completely different style. You know, you do stylistic composition that focuses on something totally different, which I think could be useful. And maybe it's just, I think, again, there's a whole history to this that I'm still learning about. But I think at some point in the 20th century, somebody decided, well, if we get them doing chorales, then they'll learn about all the things I've discussed. So I think it just turns out that music is quite instructive. And I suppose it also gives you the ability to learn about counterpoint, right? If you learn how to write a fugue as a sort of extension of that, then you understand about not only how to write smooth parts, but also how to write the sort of contrapuntal parts, which I think can be useful. You know, if you listen to a lot of pop music, often in the sort of last 30 seconds, it's quite contrapuntal, because, I mean, the example that springs to mind is God Only Knows by the Beach Boys, right? Where you have these different voices and they're all sort of interchanging. But that happens in lots of pop music. And so often I find myself kind of producing a track and having those things happening. And I know that there's a little bit of that fugue memory in there that's helping me. So anyway, that's probably far too long, but just some brief thoughts on the role of stylistic composition in learning to compose. But actually, I'm beginning to think I want to do more research on this and actually, you know, really get into it and figure out what the role is, and do we still need to do it, and all those kind of things. So yeah, for now, that's what we've got. This video is as far as I'll go. So thanks.